Welcome back to another class on Halacha for Women. We are in the sefer called Otzar Dinim by Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef Shlita. Today we want to move on to the next halacha when it comes to the washing of the hands. However, this time we're not going to speak about washing the hands for the bread meal, but we're going to speak about when one needs to wash their hands, particularly on something which is dipped into water. Now, this terminology in Hebrew is called davar shetiblo b'mashke, something which was dipped into a liquid. We'll see be'ezrat Hashem that there's 7 liquids a person has to wash his hands for, and the washing of the hands, how it is done, is very different than the morning washing. We'll see be'ezrat Hashem that there's 7 liquids that if you're going to go ahead and you're going to have a food which is washed with it, or dipped into it, or wet from it, automatically we're going to require you to wash your hands. Now, to remember the siman, to remember which each one is, in Hebrew they say, the Shulchan Aruch brings it down, the Mishnah Berurah explains it, you have to say yad, shachat, dam. Now, yad literally means hand. Shachat means to slaughter. When you slaughter, what do you see? Dam, you see blood. So it's very simple to remember the 7 liquids when you know yad, a hand that slaughters. What comes out after slaughtering? Blood. Now that we know this, we can go ahead and move on further understanding what does yad mean. Each letter is going to tell me from one of the 7 liquids that if I go ahead and I have any food which is wet from one of these 7 liquids, I need to wash my hands just like I would do for bread. Yad, Yud is going to give me yain, which is wine. This is the first liquid. Daled, Daled is going to dam, lo aleinu chas v'shalom, blood. This is the second liquid. Now you might ask me a question and say, Rabbi, it doesn't make sense. Why in the world would anybody chas v'shalom go ahead and consume blood? Now, nobody should ever know of this, but if a person ever heard of a dialysis center, when they go ahead and they change people's bloods, over there they do it through machinery. But what happens if a person, chas v'shalom, the doctor comes and say, by the way, the Mishnah Berurah explains this whole concept. The doctor comes and he says, listen, you don't have enough blood in your system and you have to actually consume blood by dipping, let's say, a cookie inside of it, or whatever it might be. You have to start consuming blood, chas v'shalom lo aleinu, because he needs blood in his system. If that's going to be the case, we're going to tell you also, you do need to wash your hands if it's a liquid which is blood. That is number 2. Number 3, moving on to the next word, shachat. Shin represent shemen zayit, which means olive oil. Now, a lot of times people, this is number 3 by the way, a lot of times people don't understand the importance of olive oil. I'm going to give you a small example. You're like, what food can I have where I have olive oil on it, so therefore I have to go ahead and wash my hands for it? When a person wants to eat a salad, and you put olive oil on it, right? It's big pieces that you could take with your hand, you could also take with a fork. So even though you're going to eat it with a fork right now, but since the pieces are big enough and you're eating a lot of them, we're going to tell you have to wash your hands even for olive oil. So never in the right state of mind would you think that you have to wash your hands for a salad where you went ahead and you put olive oil on top, but you do. Or let's say a person wants to go ahead and he wants to eat, let's say a cracker, and he went ahead and he put olive oil on top, but it doesn't matter, or any food, or tomato, or pickle, or I don't know if you guys know that there's this thing that you can do when you eat bread on Shabbat. It's called zatar. If you take zatar and you put olive oil inside and you dip the bread inside, it tastes very good. So over here, the problem is going to be over here, if it's in the bread meal, since you already washed your hands for the bread meal, you already did the washing. So good, you could go ahead and dip and you don't have to wash for the olive oil because you really did it for the bread. However, let's say a person wants to do zatar with the oil or with the olive oil, and now he wants to dip a cucumber or something inside of it, or a person is going to go ahead and he's going to put olive oil on his salad. Over there, we're going to tell you, you are required to wash your hands. So this is liquid number 3. Liquid number 4, the letter chet, chalav, milk. A lot of times you see children especially, you also have adults, that they take a chocolate chip cookie and they dip it into the milk. In such a situation, we're going to tell you, you need to go ahead and wash your hands just like you do for the bread meal before you start eating the chocolate chip cookie with dipping it into the milk. So again, you remember, we only up to now have been learning that you have to wash your hands for the bread. Today we're learning there are also other situations where you have to wash your hands. Next, tet, tal, very important, do. A lot of people overlook this one. Why? Because not everybody's going to eat fruits that were left outside. But let's say a person left his fruits outside, grapes. Now, the night before, your wife washed it, you prepared, everything was nice, you were sitting outside, clean, you went inside, you wake up in the morning, you see that there's dew on the fruits, you see it's moist. Can you go ahead and eat that grape just like that? Absolutely not. Either you have to dry it, then you could eat it, but to eat it when it's moist, you're not allowed to. For dew also, you are required to wash your hands just like you would do for the bread meal. So we have milk is number 4, dew is number 5. Dam, moving on to the next. Dam is dvash, bee honey. A person wants to have cheese and he wants to put honey on top of the cheese and just eat it like that. You must wash your hands. You're not allowed to eat the honey with anything unless you first wash your hands. Mem, mime, water. When you are eating something which is wet through water, for example, you go to a person's house or even in your own house, your wife or your children or even yourself, you wash the grapes. Once those grapes are wet, automatically we're going to tell you, you have to wash your hands just like you do for bread. Now the interesting thing is, a lot of people don't think that they come across these issues, but they really do. Wet grapes, right, or washed apple, or things like that. However, you have to understand, it's not only fruits. You also have foods, for example. A lot of times when a rabbi leads a yeshua, he tells everybody, if you guys want to get up and wash your hands for bread, please go ahead and do so. But, what is the next thing that they serve in the restaurant? Fish, right? Fish which was soaked in water. Carp, it could be whitening, it could be tilapia, which is soaked in water. That fish, Rabotai, you have to go ahead, before you eat it, you have to go ahead and you have to wash your hands. You would never in the right state of mind think that I have to wash my hands for carp. You do. If they soak it in water and then they give it to you, now when you come to eat it, you're not allowed to eat it like that. You have to go ahead and you have to first wash your hands. Now, Rav Yitzchak Yosef is not going to speak about this, but I'll tell you outside what the Shulchan Aruch says. Why is this such a big problem? Because you have to remember, our hands in general have a second level of impurity. Whenever you are touching something like water, you're making it first level impurity. That water is able to transfer impurity to another food. Let's do like this. Let me do like this. Let's say you have over here a grape. All right, let's say this is the grape. This is a person's hands. Yeah, okay, yeah, guys. I'm not a professional artist. This is a person's hand. If a person touches the grape, he washed it, everything, he dried it, he touched it, even though his hands are impure, even though there's second level impurity, by him touching it, it cannot make it impure. It cannot. However, if there is a means between the hands and the grape, which is water, right? Let's say you have the means between them is water. Since a person's hands are tameh, it makes the water tameh. The water makes the food tameh. It comes out, you are eating tameh food. That's why we tell you to go ahead and first purify your hands. Now you're allowed to go ahead and eat that grape even while it is wet. Now remember, all this is specifically when it's wet. But if you dry the item, you don't have to worry about all of this. If you dry the grape or the apple, you don't have to worry about all this. Now, before we start, we're going to see a very important rule, that this has to be done specifically out of a meal. It's not inside a meal, it has to be outside of a meal. It has to be outside of a meal. Why is that important? Because remember, when it comes to washing the hands for the bread meal, just like you wash your hands 3 times on each side, that's exactly how you're going to do it when it comes to things davar shetiblu b'mashka, like we explained. You also have to go ahead and wash your hands 3 times. The only difference is you're not going to say a bracha on this. So therefore, if you come to eat bread right now, on Shabbat night or any other meal, you're eating bread, so you wash your hands, you purified your hands. Now during the meal, if they bring you olive oil salad, or they're going to bring you a salad made out of wine, or if you want to dip chocolate chip cookie into milk in a bread meal, or if you want to go ahead and have cheese in a bread meal with honey, or you want to go ahead and eat a grape which is wet from honey, wet from water, no problem. Since you already washed your hands for the bread meal, we're going to tell you, you no longer need to worry about all this. You could go ahead and enjoy the food without a problem. But once it's out of a meal, then you have to go ahead and take all these laws into consideration. So let's just see that inside. צריכות אנשים להקפיד ליטול ידיהם גם לדבר שטיבלו במשקה. Women need to be particular when it comes to the washing of the hands, also to something which is dipped into one of the liquids, as we'll see. שדינם בזה כדין האנשים. Their law in this is just like the law for men. What does that mean? A woman has to wash her hands just like men do when it comes to something which is dipped into a liquid. So he says v'hainu, and that means to say she'ochel davar sheyesh alav ritivot mayim. You're eating a food that has on it moistness of water. Shelo betoch asud, I cannot be in the middle of a meal. Or mishar mashkin tzononin, or you are having from other cold liquids, shehem, which are yain, dvash, bee honey. He says with dvash devorim, shemen zayit olive oil, chalav, milk, tal, du, dam, blood, mayim, water. So remember, this is just the order to remember the sequence. Yad, shachat, dam. Wine, blood, olive oil, milk, dew, bee honey, or water. If a food is moist or wet from one of these liquids, you are required to go ahead and wash your hands just like you do for the bread meal without a bracha. If you remember in the previous class, we spoke about, not the previous class, but I think a few classes before that, we spoke about that there's 2 ways to wash halachically for bread. One of them was 3 times on each hand. First the right hand and then the left hand. The other halacha stated, you could go ahead and pour 1 time on each hand, like we explained in that previous class. 1 time here and 1 time here, and you're good enough. This halacha, you can go ahead and safely use it for these cases. So when I have to go ahead now and eat a grape and I don't want to dry it, which I do usually dry, but let's say if I don't want to dry it, I'll take a cup, the washing cup, I'll fill it up, pass it to my left hand, wash up to the wrist, down, make sure that everything is wet. 1 time, that's how I do it. Put it, give it back to the right hand. Again, do the same thing on the left hand until everything is wet. No bracha, dry my hands, go eat the grape. So that halacha you can use when it comes to this. You don't necessarily have to wash your hands 3 times according, like we said, according to Kabbalah when it comes by bread. ויש בזה Ritivot shu tofech al menad latfich. I want to just share with you something of a very important concept. I didn't write it in English, but I did it in Hebrew. You have to have on the food itself tofech al menad latfich. It has to be wet on condition to be able to make another thing wet. Now I want to just try to give you an example. Since we're speaking with women, if you ever start crying, you have to cry, whatever, or you're crying out of simcha, out of happiness, take a tear of yours when it's coming down. Take that tear and try to put it on another part of your body. If this tear that is coming down is able to make something else wet, that is enough to require you to go ahead and wash your hands for a food which has that amount of liquid on it. However, what happens sometimes, a person, he cries, after the tear goes down, he has a stream left. If you take that moistness that's after the tear went down, and now you try to make something else wet on the side, it's not going to make it wet. So if it's that type of moistness, we're going to tell you on that you don't have to wash your hands. When we're speaking about over here that you have to wash your hands for one of the 7 liquids, that is specifically in the situation where it's tofech amnal atfich, that it has enough water to be able to make something else wet, even a little bit. But if it's moist, like I'll tell you, if you ever see, when you wake up in the morning, if you wake up, you see your car is full of dew. It's moist. Try to put your hand on the car and put it back on another. You see, once it goes on this finger, that's it. You can't make anything else wet. That type of moistness, we're going to tell you, you're not obligated to wash your hands for one of the liquids that a food is washed with or dipped into, and so on and so forth. And so too, im matbil letoch mashke. Another important point, we spoke about this. If you are dipping it into a liquid, you also have to wash your hands. Not necessarily do I have to tell you that I have to wash my hands only if I wash the grapes, or I put the olive oil on my salad, or I put honey on my cheese. No, it also applies to foods which you dip into one of the 7 liquids. So therefore, like we gave a classic example. A person wants to go ahead and he wants to dip chocolate chip cookie into milk. Does he have to wash his hands? Absolutely. Like for bread, like I gave you the example, halachically one time will be fine without a bracha. Or a lot of times, especially older people, they like taking a biscuit, a cookie, and they put it into tea or coffee. Now, tea or coffee compromises majority of water. For that, you also have to wash. So you see, it's not only for bread that you only have to wash. You have either criteria that also where we require you to go ahead and wash your hand. And so too, if you are dipping it into a liquid, into one of the 7 liquids, you need to go ahead and wash your hands. However, no blessing is necessary, like we've been speaking about it when it comes to the 7 liquids. You need to wash your hands for the wet food, just like you wash for bread. So just like you wash for bread, you should wash for wet food. The laws that are applicable to the washing of the hands for bread have exactly the same halacha when it comes to the wet food. However, you're not blessing on it. That is the only exception. וגם בזה יש לחנך את הבנות הקטנות איתו ידיהם לדבר שטיבלו במשקה. So too, you have to go ahead and you have to educating your children, even your small boys, your small girls, that they also have that obligation to go ahead and make sure that they wash their hands like they would do for bread without a bracha when you're dealing with one of the 7 liquids. Okay. Now we spoke about when you have to wash your hands. Now we're going to speak about when not to wash your hands for the 7 liquids, even when you have 7 liquids on it. So first he's going to tell us like this. And however, if you had a fruit that you went ahead and you washed it with water, and you dried it, you don't have to go ahead and wash your hands as long as it's not wet, where it's able to make something else wet. Alright, that is simple. Again, like I explained, if it's moist, if it's wet enough to make something else wet, you have to wash your hands. If it's not wet enough to make something else wet, you don't have to wash your hands. And if you washed a fruit or anything else and you dried it completely, you don't have to worry about washing your hands. The whole thing is specifically when it's wet and it's able to make something else wet. And so too, hamad purusot uga pachod mikizad because te o kafe cham. Here we go. Before I gave you an example that if a person is going ahead and he's dipping a cookie or cake into tea or coffee, we explained you have to wash your hands. Comes Rav Yitzchak Yosef Shloita and he says, when is that you have to wash your hands by dipping cookies or cake into tea or coffee? When are we going to tell you have to wash your hands? That is specifically if the cookie or the cake is more than 1 ounce, if it's more than 27 grams. However, if you are dipping a cookie or a piece of cake which is less than 1 ounce, we're going to allow you to do. That's one of the exceptions. However, dipping a piece of cake or cookie less than 1 ounce, which is less than 27 grams, we're going to tell you for that you don't have to wash your hands. One second, I'm dipping it into milk. So therefore, if a child wants to go ahead and dip a chocolate chip cookie into milk, it's better maybe you should break it in half and then dip it into milk, because now you're not going to have that problem because it's less than a kazayit. Just want to see something. Give me 1 second. No. I don't think that's going to be fine. 1 second. I'll just tell you why. Okay. I just remembered something. 1 second. Okay, I just remembered something learning in the Halacha. When it comes to milk, there is a machloket. Because why are we allowing you? I want to take that back. I'll take that back. I'll tell you why. I just don't recall the halacha now. I don't want to say something which is wrong. I want to take that halacha back. Once I clear it up, I'll bring it back out. But I'll take that halacha back what I meant when I said to break the chocolate chip cookie in half and then dip it into the milk. Don't do it yet, and I'll tell you why. Because there are 3 criteria that have to be met in order for you to go ahead and do something. Meaning to not have to wash your hands when it comes to these 7 liquids. Over here we're dealing with dipping a piece of cake or cookie less than 1 ounce, but what are you dipping it into? Tea or coffee. Tea and coffee are hot, it's cooked. So the thing is with milk, I remember that there is a machloket, there's an argument if milk is considered to be cooked or not, and I'll tell you what I mean. It is pasteurized, right? They do have a high boiling point, but I remember that there was an argument if it's going to help. You know something? Let me double check right now and I'll tell you exactly the situation. Okay, so that is very important. Now I just clarified it. The Shulchan Aruch in Simon Kuf Nun Chet in Halacha Dalet, he brings this down. The Mishnah Berurah in Sif Katan Tet Zayin speaks about it, and then Amudei Horah, Rabbi Dahan Sefer, he says in Sif Katan Vav, he brings us 3 rules. So let's make that correction, okay? Because I'll tell you what the whole problem over here is. Do we look at milk as if it's pasteurized or not? Right? Are they really cooking the milk or not? So over there's a machloket, but we're going to go like this. There are 3 conditions that Rabbi Dahan brings down, that if you meet any 2 of them, you are allowed to go ahead and eat that food even though it's wet. So he says if it's less than 1 ounce, if it's a cooked liquid, or if you're not touching it with your hands, basically using a fork. So for example, if I would have to eat a wet grape, and if it's less than a kazayit, and I'm using a fork, I could eat it, no problem. Because I have 2 out of the 3. I'm not touching it with my hands, and it's less than 1 ounce. And in our case over here, when I'm dipping a piece of cookie or cake less than 1 ounce, which I have right over here, the first condition, I'm dipping it into tea or coffee, which are hot. I have the second condition. That's what I'm allowed to go ahead and I'm allowed to dip it. But when it comes to the milk case, we're going to tell you over there you're not allowed to do it. Over there, we're going to tell you that if you're dipping a cookie, even if it's less than a kazait, into milk, since it is cold, we're going to tell you you're not allowed to go ahead and dip into the milk. Why? Because it only meets one condition. It's only less than 1 ounce, but it's still not cooked. But what happens if you cooked the milk and now it's hot and you want to dip it? If it's less than a kazait, then it's obvious. Then once you have 2 out of 3, you are good to go. Okay, that was very important that I picked up on that because I remember the machloket. Okay, so 2 out of 3, you could go ahead and be lenient. Fine. So let's just see this one more time. One more time, guys. וכן המטבלת פירוסה עוגה פחות מכזית בכוס תה או קפה חם, אין צריכה ליטול לידיים אף שנוגעת בידיה בעוגה. And so too, if a woman is taking a piece of cake or a piece of cookie, which is less than a kazait, and she is dipping it into a hot coffee or hot tea, she does not need to wash her hands, even though she's clearly touching the cookie or the cake. So again, since it's less than 1 ounce and it's a cooked liquid, you don't have to worry. You know, now that I'm thinking about this, now that we got the 3 rules when it comes to these laws, so it comes out that if you're going to end up eating a salad where you put olive oil on top of it, if you're going to eat that salad with a fork, and I think the pieces are not 1 ounce pieces. So if you're going to take a fork and use it to eat the salad which was put olive oil on top of it, we're going to tell you, you have rule number 3 and you have rule number 1. Since you have 1 and 3, we're going to tell you you're allowed to go ahead and eat it even without washing your hands. So it comes out over here, let's just try to summarize it. This is very important. it's good I just remembered this halacha because he's not bringing it down over here. That's why I had to say it. So let's do this one more time. 3 rules, 2 out of 3, we're good. Less than 1 ounce, cooked liquid, not touching with your hands. Once you have any 2 out of 3, you're allowed to go ahead and eat it without a problem. So if I have a piece of cookie, I want to take a cookie which is less than 1 ounce and dip it into hot coffee or tea, I'm allowed to do it because I have 1 and I have 2. So I have 2 out of 3. What happens if I want to go ahead now and I want to eat a salad which is, they put olive oil inside of it and they mixed it together, and I'm going to use a fork. I'm not touching it with my hands, and I'm eating less than 1 ounce. Every time that I'm putting in my mouth is less than 1 ounce. We're going to tell you also for that you don't have to touch. So you are able to go around this halacha by trying to use the 2 out of 3 rule. Okay. והוא הדין, and so to the same halacha is going to apply, באוכלת פרי או ירק רטוב במים, פחות מכזית, וגם אין נוגעת בפרי עצמה, אלא באמצעות המזלג, אין צריכה ליטול ידיים. Alright, same thing over here. If a woman is she's eating a wet fruit or vegetable, less than 1 ounce, like we explained, and she's using a fork, we're going to tell you don't have to go ahead and wash your hands. So I see how he gave the rule. He didn't give us the 3 criteria. That's why if you remember in the previous class, when we spoke about washing the hands, there's a lot of halachot that go into it. In any event, let's just do a small summary. A woman needs to be particular also on something which is dipped into water. It's called in Hebrew, davar shitiblo b'mashke, something which was dipped into liquid, meaning the food is wet. When do we say that this halacha applies? That is specifically when you're not inside of a meal, you're out of a meal. Number 3, the liquid, in order for us to tell you that this halacha applies, it has to be one from the 7 liquids. Yad shachat dam, a hand that slaughters blood. Yad, yain, wine. Dalet, dam, blood. Shin, shemen, zayit, olive oil. Chet, chalav, milk. Tet, tal, du. Dalet, Dvash, Bihani, Mem, Maim, water. When are we going to say that this halacha applies? That's only if it's tofeich al manat latfiach. That's only if it has enough water on it that I'm able to make something else wet, like I explained with a tear. 5. Dipping, when does that halacha apply? Also, when you're dipping a food into a liquid. Even though we told you, just like you wash for bread, you should wash for wet foods. Nevertheless, we're going to tell you no blessing is necessary. This is, and also we concluded with number 8, educating your children to also follow these rules. When not to wash. Dipping a piece of cake or cookie less than 1 ounce into hot tea or hot coffee. Eating a wet fruit or vegetable less than 1 ounce and using a fork, you don't have to wash your hands. The rule is less than 1 ounce cooked liquid, not touching with your hands. If you have if you have 2 out of 3 from these 3 rules, you are able to go ahead and be lenient and you don't have to go ahead and wash your hands. Okay, have a great day. Baruch Adonai L'olam.